given me the opportunity to study, and sport has given me the opportunity to make lifelong friends. Sport has actually given me the life I have today, and I owe everything to sport.
Welcome to Brew, the world's hottest sports podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bromfield, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for another exciting episode. At Brew, we dive deep into the latest topics and trends in the sporting industry, offering diverse perspectives and thought-provoking discussions. Whether you're a passionate fan, a professional athlete, or simply a sports enthusiast, this is the place to be. Join me as we explore everything from game-changing strategies to behind-the-scenes stories, all aimed at elevating your understanding of the world of sports. This is Ballers Brew.
Imagine you are tasked with rebuilding a struggling basketball team after a series of disappointing seasons. The team's morale is low, fan engagement has dropped, and the media is highly critical. Your goal is to restore the team's reputation, create a winning culture, and rebuild trust with the players, fans, and sponsors. Initially, your first thoughts may be, how do I approach this challenging scenario? What strategies do I implement to motivate the players, regain the trust of fans, and attract new sponsors? How do I navigate the media scrutiny and transform the team's performance on and off the court? This is a common dilemma often faced by sports managers. Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode of Ballers Brew, we have the privilege of hosting a true sports enthusiast and a dynamic professional in the field of sports management. Please welcome Keagan Van Aarde, who currently holds the esteemed position as the sport manager for both cricket and athletics at Marty Sport, Stellenbosch University. Keagan's journey in the world of sports has been nothing short of remarkable. With a passion for netball, strength and conditioning, coaching, and administrative work, he has truly immersed himself in various aspects of the sporting industry. His rich experience in the field includes serving as a cricket lecturer, assistant coach, and assistant sports scientist. As a dedicated member of the sports community, Keagan has also taken on the role of acting residence head at Huisneertling, the Marty Sport High Performance Residence. In terms of education, Keagan holds a BA in sports science and psychology from Stellenbosch University, which he followed by a BSc honors in performance sports. Today, we have the privilege of exploring Keagan's why and how it relates back to his influential role in sports management, especially within the realms of cricket and athletics. So let's get ready for an insightful discussion as we uncover the driving force behind his passion and the impact it has on shaping the sporting landscape. Welcome, Keagan Van Aarde. We are thrilled to have you on Ballers Brew.
Good evening, Michael. Thank you for having me. And sure, what a mouthful. I think thank you for the introduction and acknowledging the education and the role that I've already played in sport. I'm very excited to be on the podcast, Ballers Brew, and I'm really happy to share some insight and have a very insightful discussion with you.
Thank you so much for coming on to Ballers Brew. I'm also very excited to delve into these questions that I have lined up for you to perhaps get a better perspective on your role within Marty Sport. And for those that are listening, perhaps to share a little bit of insight, but as I mentioned in the introduction, Keagan is currently the acting residence head of Huisneertling, which is the Marty Sport High Performance Residence, which he and I also have a working relationship, as I am a student that resides within Huisneertling. And over this year, so to speak, the past 10 months, I have had the privilege of working alongside Keagan Van Aarde and developing a professional relationship with him and having the fortunate opportunity to further understand the way in which he approaches his work. And as I said, it's truly an honor. And perhaps a good place to start. Within the world of sports, it is often effortless to become engrossed in the moment, given the dynamic nature of the industry today. However, it is crucial not to overlook the individuals who are essential to the smooth functioning of the sports industry. For those that are listening and who may be unfamiliar with who you are, may you provide us with a brief synopsis as to who is Keagan Van Aarde?
Yeah, Michael, I think, a good starting point for me as I share this journey with you is, I'm just Keagan Van Aarde, a young kid grew up in Paul, went to the community schools in Paul where I've excelled in both volleyball and cricket. My dad was my volleyball coach. I've played volleyball up for the Western Cape team until the age of 15. And then I started to take cricket serious, where I've made several provincial teams playing for the local union in Boland. And then coming to the end of my high school career, I've had to make tough decisions. And when I say tough decisions, it was, do I go to England and play 6 months of cricket to earn a good salary? Or, do I come and have a good education and come to Stellenbosch University? And it was a tough decision because, yes, Dad wanted me obviously to play a bit more cricket. Mom was like, no, you need to study. So eventually I've made up my mind. I came here to do BA Sports Science with psychology. I've graduated. I've played for Maltese cricket up until 2016. And then after that, I've got an injury in 2016, actually 2 days before my birthday, the 23rd of Jan. And, that has really been a career-changing injury for me because I had to sit down with myself because I was on crutches for about 6 months as I have gone on this journey now in 2016. And for me, it was about sitting down with myself and asking myself, what is next? And when I enrolled into my honors, I had a clear vision. And for me, that was, sport has given me the opportunity to study, and sport has given me the opportunity to make lifelong friends. Sport has actually given me the life I have today, and I owe everything to sport. And yes, for those that's tuning in, I'm also alumni of Netball, where I've spent 5 years of my life, 6 years of my life as a student athlete, being on the leadership bodies of Netball. And now coming back, for me, it's almost like a full circle. So that is just a little bit of me. Nothing glamorous, nothing fancy. For me, I always just see myself as a kid growing up in Paul and owes sport something that I won't necessarily be able to give back, but will strive to give sport the recognition for what they've done what sport has done in my life.
Something that's really cool, and you're touching on your personal journey at the moment within the realm of cricket and obviously how that's led up to where you are today. And I always find it truly inspiring when you look at the uniqueness associated to each individual story and how that plays an integral role within their own context of sport, and how that can lead them into these, triumphant moments, but at the same time, these moments of despair and difficulty, as you rightfully mentioned. But at the end of the day, those are the moments that truly shape us to be the individuals that we are today. And as you mentioned, through these journeys that we go through, we often encounter these hard-hitting moments where we need to make, life-changing decisions based on the sport itself, whether it could be career changing or perhaps, as you mentioned, deciding on where you're going to play. And, behind the camera, behind this recording, we've had one-on-ones where, we touching on this exact topic where in the moment, it's hard to foresee the future, but you're trying to make the right decisions as to what is going to be the best for you in order to acquire longevity in what you are wishing to achieve and what your aspirations may be within sport. And something I find in my own personal journey, and it's really cool that you've mentioned it too within cricket, but and I don't want to generalize or stereotype, but as you rightfully mentioned, sports often plays as the doorway to opportunity. It provides so many young kids the opportunity to step into environments that your wildest dreams couldn't even imagine. And it opens up endless opportunities for anything your heart could possibly desire, with inverted commas and stars, if you're willing to work to get there, because sport doesn't just come without work or sacrifice, but through sports and through having fun and through having faith and through enjoying what you're doing, you're allowed to have those opportunities, which is really, really cool.
No, I agree with you, Michael. And it's For me, I mean, like you rightfully said, it's the journeys that we go through that helps you to make that decisions. But for me, again, like I've stated earlier and saying, wasn't it for sport, I won't have the close-knit friends that I have. And the sacrifices that I've made was supported by those close friends, the family. And I mean, if you look at cricket, I always say to the players that comes into Maltese now, that there's only a small percentage of players that will eventually play for the Proteas. But yet you can use sport as a vehicle to other successes. We sit we're in a university space where people come in and they actually get a degree, and that is one of my pillars that I'm working on, is that when you graduate at Stellenbosch University, and in particular Maltese cricket, you will become a better person, and you will graduate if you become a professional cricketer, with a degree. So I agree with you. Sport must be actually seen as a vehicle to change lives, and to change and bring hope to situations where there's no hope.
That is really cool. And you mentioned now the successes within sport, but I also do think it's important to note that not all the time is it going to be you're striving for those dubs and getting the wins, which are easily acquired. Sometimes you also have to go through losses and challenges, and that equates to growth and lessons. And specifically in the context of this university, and maybe it applies to other universities, both in South Africa and internationally, within sports, you're not only learning sporting skills, but it too provides the opportunity to further yourself and better yourself as an individual, as it provides you life skills, things that are going to take you beyond the game of sport itself. And this can often lend itself to leadership, which is, something that we can see within the various structures that we have within multi-sport. And perhaps maybe to take it back to your journey as an individual who has a strong passion for sport, what led you to your current role as both the Maltese athletic and Maltese cricket manager, having acquired both your degrees and wrapping up your professional playing career?
Michael, I think for me, what really led to where I am today is, again, I'm going to refer back to the injury in 2016. Yes, I was at the crossroad and asking myself, do I still want to do the 6 o'clock gym? Do I want to go and run the Bergpad in Stellenbosch? That it just makes you tired. But what really changed it for me is when I sat down and I've changed my view. And I looked back and I said to myself, if I can help 1 or 2 students have the same experience at Stellenbosch University, at Maltese cricket that I had, then I know I'm halfway there. And again, yes, injuries come and go. And up until today, I am sad that I didn't have a longer cricket career. But in saying that, I am very, very driven by my passion for sport. And the fact that I still believe that sport is really a tool that we can use to enhance people's life. And like I said to you earlier again is, if it is through using sport to get a degree, it's something that if you didn't have sport, then you wouldn't have accomplished that, But also if you become a professional cricketer, then all the lights goes on, but that professional career can be cut short by a season. But yet you can fall back on something. And I think that is, for me, a big thing. And I think that is what led me to where I am. And again, that drive behind my passion for sport. I mean, athletics is completely out of my comfort zone. I haven't done athletics as an athlete myself. But I've come to understand the sport and how I can bring different dynamics. If it is from a leadership point of view, if it is from, just governance point of view, or if it is just from a mentoring perspective and shape athletics in the country. So again, that's what has really led up until to where I am today.
What you mentioned earlier, and you touched on it, and you said one of your, or maybe the career-defining moment was the injury that you obtained, and how that led to you having to make critical decisions on the way in which you wish to move forward. And I am fairly confident that around the world, within various sporting codes, you often find that there are many athletes And that can be at a high school level or at a university level, at a student athlete level, a professional playing level, that there are athletes that, due to unforeseen and unfortunate situations, find themselves where they are injured and they now are faced with setbacks. And it's now the question of, how are you going to keep moving forward, trying to chase your dreams and try fulfill your aspirations? And you also get the alternate side, where there are individuals who are struggling with mental health. And there are various aspects that can negatively impact and hinder athletes within their journey of trying to fulfill their dreams, you know, their end goals within their various sporting codes. And as you mentioned, the driving factor for you was your passion, the fire and love that you had for the game. And we often find that within ourselves, that all athletes, there's this little flame that burns deep within inside of us that keeps us wanting to go back for more, no matter what that may be. And you always try and think of it in this childlike mindset where it's a win at all costs type of situation. You're willing to do anything and everything for the love of the game, for the sport that you are absolutely obsessed with. You know, I mean, I'm a swimmer. I look at a line for nearly 4 hours a day. And some people think that's crazy. But similarly, I could say for cricket, you stand in the sun for a very long time, you know, but it's for the love of the game and it's for the passion of the sport that we have invested hours and hours and hours into. And we touched on it earlier, and we said sport gives you as an individual the opportunity into countless environments and contexts, whatever that may be. And then in your situation, on the flip of the coin, you often find yourself that you're blessed and privileged to now give back to the community that's given you so much within your life. And perhaps maybe to bring it back into your role. In today's sporting industry, it is very dynamic and it's rapidly evolving. Subsequently, this places numerous demands on sports managers. Within this role, you are constantly required to keep up with the fast-paced environment. Can you perhaps share with the audience some of the key responsibilities and challenges that you face day to day as a sports manager?
Yeah, you know, as a sport manager, you got to be forward thinking. Otherwise, you will limit yourself and the sporting code that you work with. If I look on a daily basis, you know, the challenges that we face is I sit at two different ends, you know, Michael, at cricket, where the professional arm is just growing so quickly. And university cricket is really becoming this like academy where professional teams come and poach. And then the other side of the spectrum, I sit at the athletics side where we are not as professional as we would like to be, you know, and the number of athletes that get supported is limited due to funds available. And, you know, that is one of most probably the biggest challenge in the industry is the financial models that comes up in different environments. Sponsorships, you know, you look at where, for example, it's easier to sponsor team sport, but it's very hard to have an individual getting a sponsor. And then just day-to-day administration, you know, looking at the tournaments ahead, you know, strategically looking at where you want to place the club in the next 3 to 5 years. You know, for me, this is now my 4th year at cricket. And one of the goals was to be one of the most transformative clubs, you know, at Stellenbosch University, but also to transform the ways of thinking of cricketers. And if I look back at our successful year last year, I can say that we've achieved 80% of that, because we don't just have cricketers now that they just want to play cricket. They have a great understanding of what it takes to become the next Protea in South Africa. So that is where for me, like I said, the biggest challenges again is to go and find, you know, be blunt, money for our athletes, but also, like I said, I sit on both sides of the spectrum, which is very nice because you get to appreciate what you have when you sit on the one side of the spectrum, when there's other athletes that does not have what we have, which for me is it's critical. And that's always something I remind my cricketers of at Stellenbosch University, is that we get to appreciate what we have in cricket.
That is really cool. Something I'm tapping into and I'm trying to understand within the different sporting codes. You rightfully mentioned that cricket may be seen as a more professional sporting code in the sense of the daily ongoings and the things that you're dealing with there. And similarly, or oppositely, within athletics, it's more semi-professional in the sense of how you're dealing with those athletes. But in both contexts, you still have, you're still producing world-class level athletes, where athletes are both playing at a provincial level and representing South Africa on an international stage, whether it may be at the Diamond League or currently at the FISU events in China, or in cricket at I think it's the IPT. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
IPL, in the IPL
Yeah,
tournaments.
yeah.
And it's really cool because even though considering those circumstances, you're still able to continuously produce a high level of athletes. And I always denote that back to the environments in which you're able to create within the role that you have. Perhaps though, slightly off topic though, and this just came to me whilst you're speaking. Do you perhaps think that in terms of the notoriety of the sports, it comes from the context of cricket South Africa and the popularity in which cricket can generate more funding as opposed to athletics when you're looking at it in I think it's ASA?
Yeah, I think it's a very twofold, Michael. Yes, if you look at cricket, was always part of the big five sporting codes in our country, and there was always funding available, and not necessarily just because of the popularity. Yes, there is more cricket people playing cricket, but I actually take it back to what we do in our school system. Because I remember, and I always joke about it, up until grade 11, we still had clearer sport where, irrespective if you did not compete for the school in athletics vest, you had the opportunity to run against your classmate. So for me, it is just the exposure. And I think that is what cricket has done to an extent, right? In their arena, is that they've given us exposure from grade 3. There's like KFC cricket. There's, back in the day, it was Baker's mini cricket. And then there's this age group provincial, where athletics have something similar, but I don't think the funding model is something that needs to be revisited. Because like you rightfully said, if you look at Team South Africa, we still produce top athletes. Even on the Diamond League, you have Akani Simbini running at the Diamond League. You have Wade van Niekerk representing our country. But I think, again, it is around exposure. What exposure do we create for athletes? And I must credit Athletics South Africa. In the last 2 years, they have brought back the Grand Prix, which is, for me, a step in the right direction. So I think we need to be patient. I think we need to understand where the sporting codes are in our country, in the context of our country. That is very important. And that is just a personal belief for me, because everyone, you look on TV, you see Jacques Kallis play, everyone wants to be the next Jacques Kallis. So that exposure, where now we get to watch the Diamond League, we have athletes at Stellenbosch University that's at FISU, at the World Student Game. So now you get to watch these athletes, you get to watch the Grand Prix that is broadcasted by SuperSport. And I believe that is something that has really changed the landscape of sport. It's just that exposure in our country. But again, I believe you need to understand in the context of South Africa where the sporting codes are.
Takeaway point that I'm getting is definitely you need to understand or realize the pertinence in the role in which grassroots level sports plays, specifically within the context of South Africa, and how exposing children at a younger age, and whether it may be for purely wanting to be outside and being active, but allowing them to develop those skills at a younger age and exposing them to, through media or television or news or through hearsay, but the stories of the greats, and how that can also inspire individuals to want to continue pursuing the love and passion for which they may find within their various sporting codes.
Hey there, Balls Nation. Just a quick pause in the action here. You already know that our mission is to bring you the hottest, most insightful discussions on everything sports related. But as we continue to grow and expand our reach, we can't do it alone. Your ratings, reviews and shares enable us to reach more sports enthusiasts like you and build a community where diverse perspectives thrive. So, here's the only ask I have of you. Please help us spread the word. It only takes a few seconds to leave a review or a share, but its impact is immense. Thank you for being a part of the Brew family. Let's keep the conversation going and elevate the landscape of sports together.
you touched on now, you're referring to how something may generate more exposure, such as a Jacques Kallis being on the TV screen representing the Proteas. And that obviously has a strong tie to media deals within South Africa. If you're looking at SuperSport and the endorsements that are happening on the side and how that's pertinent to then thereafter generate a revenue to ensure that those media rights are put in place. Perhaps though it's important to note that sports management, it is a multifaceted field that requires effective navigation of a complex landscape. How do you effectively and efficiently direct your energy within your role, which involves dealing with athletes, student athletes, sponsors, media, and other stakeholders?
Yes, Michael. So I haven't really had the privilege to deal extensively with media around specific athletes, because these days in cricket, even if you're in grade 11, you will have an agent, that deals with those things. And I think that is also where we as sport managers and sport administrators need to understand where the line is for us to say, this is not my field of expertise. You always laugh. I always say, let the expert remain the expert. Because if you can acknowledge that, then I think we're halfway there. For example, I don't always know the broadcasting deals. I can equip myself, I can upskill myself, but that's why there is people that study these things. And you get those people involved to help you understand what this broadcasting deal would mean for a player. And that is where I believe as administrators, we need to understand where our role ends and where it starts.
Something I mentioned earlier, and I think it always relates back to any corporate environments or sporting environment that you try and place yourself into. And it denotes back to their environment which you are trying to create to ensure success. And previously when we spoke off camera, you mentioned to me that, and now specifically looking at the corporate identity of multi-sport, that in an institution such as multi-sport, you, or as the director, you have the privilege of placing and appointing specific individuals around you in your immediate sphere, whether that be PR, HR, finance, or marketing, whatever the role might be. And as you rightfully mentioned, leave it to the experts. And in your role as the manager, you are working in conjunction with these other individuals in a team environment to ensure cohesively that you are able to ensure that you can create the best or most successful environment for, number one, the athlete, and number two, the corporate brand, essentially.
No, definitely, Michael. I think at times, like I said, you have to bring those people on board to make you understand. We go through these extensive exercises around what is the corporate value or what is the brand identity. And at times you can't shoulder all that responsibility. And that is why, it is important to have someone on a PR point or on different fields, because at the end of the day, if you build a successful and a sustainable program, you're going to need the support of those experts, because you get leaders that is strong in managing styles and they lack in, for example, the understanding of commercial rights and those things. But you have the opportunity to appoint someone, if it's long-term based, if it's short-term based, but just to get a clearer understanding of what your worth is. And I believe in sport or in any company, they appoint people to help grow and not to necessarily just look internal. So for me, that is something that I believe is one thing that top people are getting right, is they appoint the right people to help them live out the vision that they have for the company or even for any sporting team.
Something that's definitely a takeaway, you're referring to understanding the, number one, the environments, which denotes to the individuals which are involved. And in your role, any corporate role, leadership role, you need to, number one, be able to work with and deal with the unique individuals and personalities and characters that are, again, as I mentioned earlier, working in conjunction with you. And specifically within a South African context, again, we are trying to understand then how does that role play a pertinent link to in which you are trying to establish a healthy working environment for your athletes. Specifically though, looking from a global perspective and the sporting industry as a whole, the industry is constantly evolving with new trends and technology shaping the landscape. What strategies do you employ to stay ahead of the curve and adapt to the ever-changing trends and technologies in sports management? Does your academic background within sports science assist you through this process?
I always laugh when this type of questions come up, because I love reading, and I spend time researching a lot of things. So definitely my academic background in sports science helps a lot, purely because you get to see it from a different perspective. Like I said, I spend numerous hours researching, and if it's not in research journals, you read up on what the Australian Institute for Sports Science is doing differently to what we are doing, or you just try and see, what is out there. But linking it back to my academic field is, if you look at what we do in sports science, that gives you an edge, because it helps you to understand on a two-way street. One, you get to understand your athletes and the one arm of conditioning, etc. But then also you understand the why people bring certain changes in. Because like I said earlier, you have to be forward thinking. We can't be stuck in how we've done it 2 years ago. You get to constantly evolve. And the only way this is one motto that I do, is you get to equip yourself. You can't be the same Keagan that you've been 22, so you get to upskill yourself, even if it's just by reading articles, not necessarily another education degree, but you can't be the same leader, sport ad manager that you were last year, or in 2021, or 2019, because we had COVID 2020. Education is, for me, the most powerful tool. And that is what you need to do. You need to educate yourself.
And it's crazy to think, because, as human beings, we have a desire to consistently or continuously ask the question of why. Why do things occur in the manner in which they do? And the only way in which we are able to, so to speak, quench the thirst of wanting to understand or wanting to know how things come to be, it's through knowledge. And, it's probably cliche, but knowledge equals wealth. And within any environment or industry that you are involved in, you constantly need to be able to adapt or pivot, because culture and trends are continuously changing. And if you can't keep up or sustain what you are trying to achieve, or perhaps readjust your goals in context to the model in which you are working, you will never truly reach success. Or you might clinch onto success for a very brief period, but that bar is continuously going to keep going up. And you need to be able to, as you rightfully mentioned, through knowledge and through educating yourself, specifically within the context of sports, and understanding how the industry, and just looking at technological trends and how that can just improve gameplay, whether it be in netball or athletics, and SNC testing, and how that can give you an edge come race day, come match day. And you can use these new techniques, whether they may seem very left field initially, eventually those become the forerunners in what you are trying to achieve at the end of the day.
Yes, no, definitely, Michael. I had a privilege of working with Marty's Netball this year, and I've worked with Coach Zane back in 2019. And something that she referred to this in the start of this year is, we got to be better than we were the previous year. After they've won double gold in 2022, the head coach was driving that process to say, we got to be better this year. And yes, we've had recent success, but the one thing that what I've learned from her is, she has created an environment where people are allowed to make mistakes and to learn from their mistakes. And that was, and I can share that because it was quite recently, beginning of July, I was working with them as a team manager. And that was, for me, the one plus point, but that stood out for me at this tournament. It was that constant drive to become better and not to be complacent.
I immediately think the first thought that pops into my mind is, you're only as good as your last match. You're only as good as that last effort or last attempt that you tried to make a statement, or to make that match-winning play, so to speak. And as you rightfully mentioned, even if it is a loss, you're able to turn those losses into lessons. And there's always value in what you're doing. And it's definitely a takeaway point. And I think it comes down to the role of both the coach, the manager, and the management team, in which you create a culture that is, number one, sustainable throughout the longevity of a season to ensure that the well-being of athletes are catered for, but also that of the management and staff, so that you are able to bring forth the best out of those players. That doesn't need to be represented through a gold medal or a trophy, but it may be something intangible that shows the developments of those individuals that you can look back on in the next season and going, okay, cool. We've built the blocks, we've laid the foundation. Let's continue moving forward into trying to further ourselves and continue developing further. A part of that, when we're talking about culture and development within players specifically, that more looks into the current, the now, and how you're looking into the future. But perhaps how does it work? We are now looking for individuals coming in. So talent scouting and player recruitment play a crucial role in building successful sports teams. As someone who has once played for the Maroon Machine and who is now within your role as both the Marty's athletic and cricket manager, how do you approach talent scouting and player recruitment? What factors do you consider when identifying potential athletes for a team or organization?
So, like you said, I'm privileged to play for the Maroon Machine for Maltese cricket. And it's so true what we spoke about now around the culture. So, one thing I look at is will players actually excel in this culture? So when I agree to bring player X in, will this player come and throw the apple cart over? What type of character? So my second thing, we don't really have it like there's no measurement on paper of what character you want to bring in, because if someone's good, they're good. Let's not take away talent, but also you have to be honest with yourself when you sit with the coaches and you say, will this character of this player also be good for our environment? And at times you got to be brave and say yes, but I'm willing. Or you must be brave in saying no, but I'm willing to work with that person. And funny enough, Michael, for me as someone that sits on the other side of the table now, I always challenge coaches to go as low as the second and third team, because I believe at times we're missing the right and the late developers, that rough diamond, because not everyone gets the opportunity. In cricket, there's something called quality of opportunity, but I'm a firm believer. I'll rather work with someone that is willing to understand a process of 2 to 3 years than wanting instant success. So that is basically the four, to sum it up for you. That's 4 things that's critical for me. But then again, coaches changes. We are very fortunate to have coaches for 3 years, because that's actually an academic cycle as well, if you look at it. But it's really important to establish the culture, because when you can work from the culture, and then you can pinpoint players to fit in, because culture is actually what drives success as well.
You're mentioning earlier the cycles that occur within any organization, and how often within player recruitment you have players that come into an organization, but it's not per se that they may be there forever. And now looking at a professional sense, you may be signing a 1-year deal, a 2-year deal, or you may be signed as the franchise, so to speak, quarterback for that organization. And then, you're probably set for a lifetime. But associated with that, those teams continuously evolve. Those players are continuously being cycled out. And you rightfully mentioned that you as the management team, or those that are facilitating the development or the nurturing of how to create team success, it's established through culture. And that then stems back to the philosophy or the why, so to speak, of those that are in charge of ensuring how to make this a successful team, how to create a successful environment for those that are there. I think personally, it's a little bit risky when you might be bringing in a loose cannon into what is, so to speak, a stable environment as an individual who's got that talent, but maybe a flaring character, because as you said, that can perhaps, ruin a entire team environment. But as you mentioned, that could be a part of the risk that you're taking, but also wanting to ensure how can we accumulate or strive to make this the best team with the most talent, so that also there's players that are challenging each other, which allow for growth to bounce off of the both players themselves. And I think it's quite sad, and I think it goes back to what we touched on earlier in terms of grassroots development sport, specifically within a South African context. And now I'm specifically looking at the likes of an all-boys rugby school, where perhaps in the open division, you have an individual who's playing for the C team and post high school stops playing rugby. But maybe in the selection of that specific school, he just wasn't seen. He just never had the opportunity to shine or to make those game-winning tries or to have the opportunity to really prove his success. But he is a consistent individual in striving to better himself. And post high school, coming into university, perhaps he's playing for Residence League, and he's good enough to go on with the first XV. And as you mentioned, that's when it comes down to management to at least be open-minded or willing to scout beyond what is right in front of them.
Yeah, definitely. There's only, I mean, if you take it back to the cricketing terms, the best 11 must play, and you might miss one or two. But the reason I challenge coaches to go to the second and third team, and even now you refer to Residence League as well, is you might find that there is a player that is willing to understand the role that they need to come and play, and not necessarily eyeing the big bugs, the lights of a professional career, but understanding what they can bring to student sport. And, you've made the loose cannon, as you call them. We call them mavericks at times. But it's so important to have those players, because those players bring a different dimension to your team. And it is your role. I mean, we're going so far now at Morty's where we are very honored, and it's a privilege to work with the performance psychologist. And it is your role as the management team to include the performance psychologist, to ask those questions. How do I deal with it? But how do I get the best out of that player still? And I think we shouldn't shy away from that, because that is when we lose talent. Because, there might be raw talent. And rightfully, like you said, the selection at the school level or at grassroots might be vastly different to what you're looking for. But that's why I'm a firm believer that cricket is on the right path with what we call the quality of opportunity that they've brought in a couple of years. And I must say, that has really changed the landscape of cricket in this country as well.
That is very cool. And it's definitely true. And as you mentioned, how it does play a pertinent role in which, number one, you can acquire longevity in what you are trying to achieve, but also how can that longevity be fruitful? And perhaps to maybe take a step back in the sense, so now we're looking at talent identification to build a team specifically, as you mentioned, that starting 11. But now taking a broader perspective, if you're looking at an organization, building a successful sports team organization requires a combination of factors, which we mentioned earlier, a factor such as the team culture. Through your experience within both leadership and sporting spaces, you have been privileged to be a part of various prosperous environments. In your opinion, what are the key elements that contribute to building a successful sports team or organization, both on and off the field?
Oh, it's a heavy question. If I look back at my experiences, Michael, it differs from team to team, environment to environment. But, there's something called in South Africa a potjie course, and that's how I look at the successful teams that I've worked with. Yes, culture was the big driver, but the X factor that the team manager or the head coach brings, or the leadership group, that they are bringing to the party and into that potjie course has made it a very good potjie course. And I think that is critical. The last three that I've mentioned is a clear strategy and vision from a head coach and from a leader in that regard, out of the sporting environment, but also, something called values. And people always think about and think when we speak about values is, it's just a piece of it's just words on a piece of paper. But if you can do everything with integrity, if you can be respectful, even if we differ, or if there's disagreement between players and coaches, but it can be in a respectful manner, because we value each and everyone. We appreciate everyone's values. That for me, again, is a big thing. So my biggest Potjie course in my what I've seen so far, Michael, strong leadership teams, very good values and agreed and shared values. And then obviously a very good philosophy and vision driven by the key role player of the organization and the sporting team. And then, like we said, culture. It can eat you up, or it can drive you to the next destiny of success.
It's really cool how you mentioned you have that key role player. And in that light, from my understanding, you're looking at the, so to speak, CEO of an organization, or the director, and how they, as the head of that organization, play a pivotal role in ensuring the direction in which they see how can we make this the best environment for all. And this is now looking at the subsidiary teams below, and in the university context, because there are various sporting codes, how can that be the best direction to ensure success for all codes? How can that be the best direction to ensure success within the various structures that fall beneath that head point? So if you're looking at it from a pyramid structure, so to speak, and I'm taking my perspective now, just looking at in res, and you are placed in a position where it's your obligation to ensure that there's a clear vision and mission in which you, and then linking back to the culture and values in which you think is the most suitable to the nature of the environment to allow for fruit to be grown. And then you have to prod the questions of, okay, how am I going to get from point X to point Y with those that are around me to ensure that, okay, this is going to be a success, or this may flop, or over here we might have a little bit of tension, or over here it might be a little bit difficult because you're working with X personality or this characteristic. But at the end of the day, it's amalgamating that all together to, as you mentioned, it's a Potjie course. And for those that are perhaps international listeners, if you can imagine a stew that is put over a fire that just tastes absolutely amazing, that is what a Potjie course is.
No, definitely, Mark. And I agree with you. I mean, we can use our living example in our current environment, where where you serve as a leader, and I need to provide a good vision and strategy. But again, Michael, for me, it is you have to accept people for who and what they are. But it's ultimately my responsibility as the head to find out what makes Michael Bromfield the best leader. Not what is the personality that I'm working with. It is what can I get out of Michael to drive the vision and strategy, but also for me, how I see it is tomorrow when I leave, I know that Michael Bromfield has really equipped himself to become a better leader, to lead the next generation. Because who knows, maybe tomorrow you will be placed in my shoes and heading up the residence, and then you can learn from those experiences. And that is for me the important part. In the last it's about 10 months now that I've been here, I've allowed my leadership group to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, because it doesn't help me knowing there is needling structures, coming here and having a very authoritative and a very direct approach. And then my leaders are not growing, they're not developing. And that's why I went with the approach to say, let my leaders lead, but let me guide you where I feel it's needed, because you need to make mistakes in order to grow and to learn.
What's cool in that is that you are not placing, so to speak, boundaries on the team, but you are securing that there are buffers. You are securing to ensure that you, through your uniqueness as a leader, can tackle a situation through your own eyes, through your own experience, and try and surmount that to come up with the best possible answer that you can. But if you fail, you'll learn from it, And there's still a support structure to make sure at the end of the day we're going to get through this together. But it's an opportunity for you to take that a little bit further. And it's not a good thing to always, focus on the negatives and on the failures in life. But in the broader perspective of the world, often you get the news and the media who like to misconstrued stories about how things play out to be. And in today's media-driven world, managing the public image and reputation of athletes and teams is paramount. How do you handle the pressure of managing the public image and reputation of athletes and teams in an era of intense media scrutiny?
Mike, I always tell people, and this is my athletes, the administrators that work with me, the coaches, you know the truth. So whatever the media says, if you can go to bed tonight knowing what has been said is not the truth or is the truth, and you accept the fact that it is something that comes with, I always make the joke, I say it comes with a paycheck, but it comes with the development in sport. It comes with the growth. It comes with becoming a professional athlete or student athlete or becoming a big name. Because you must remember, and I firmly still believe this, that sport people is the role models we need in the world. But you got to be authentic with yourself. You got to have integrity towards yourself. And that is always been my advice to all the athletes that comes through. I've had recently, without mentioning names and a sporting code, I've had recently a situation where an article came out and the athlete was devastated. And he was like, this is breaking trust between me and my management group. And I said to him, I went to bed knowing that if I've advised you what to do, but yet you knew what the truth is. So you shouldn't feel the way that you feel. And social media, at times I think to myself that the damage that social media can do to athletes. And that's why I'm very, when it is in competition stages, I try and advise people or athletes to stay away from social media, because it can be detrimental, and you mentioned mental health earlier. You look around sport people that also struggles with mental health. It is the pressure from social media, and from the internet world. And again, I'm going to say this, and this is most probably my closing remark on this question is, as long as you stay authentic to yourself, you know the truth, you can sleep with both eyes closed, then the media world can come for you.
And it's sad to think that in today's day and age, how companies are willing to mislead the public into making up stories in order to drive engagement. And that's often what we see, where things are put out of context in order to benefit the organization, but it's to the detriment of either the athlete or individual. And I mean, kudos to the news company if they do get it right. But most of the time, what we often see, that is not the case. And it has led to social media often becoming a very toxic landscape, specifically for athletes, when you find individuals who are comparing themselves now to the competition, or they're viewing themselves in a manner in which is different to what they had initially, which leads them into a bad space of falling out of love with what they love to do, with the passion and fire, which we touched on earlier, for the sport, which they have so long invested themselves into. And taking it back to a personal story, and it leads back into leadership, but also sport. And I had a coach who I was under the guidance of within the past 2 years, and also my previous prim of Hayes Neetling. And they said to me, the one day I came up to them for guidance, and I said, how do you, as an individual stepping into this space where there's so much pressure on you to perform, where there are so many eyes on you, and you have to make the sole decision and represent an organization or an identity, or for instance, the Proteas or South Africa, or whether it may be Marty Sport or Hayes Neetling, but it's on a broader scale, whether it be the community, whether it be the nation, whether it be internationally. How do you manage and cope with that pressure? And the answers I received was fairly simple, and it relates exactly to what you said. You stay true to yourself. you stay true to who you are as an individual, and you stay true to your integrity and your values and your philosophies as to who you are. What grounds you as Keagan Van Aarde? What grounds me as Michael Bromfield? And if you're able to do that, you're able to ensure that, number one, you can be a solid citizen, a great athlete, and a good leader if you're able to stay true to the course in which you are trying to steadfast on.
Oh, definitely, Michael. And that is the truth. And again, it comes back to your why. Stay true to your why. And for me, that is the biggest learning that you can take from that. And the answers that those individuals have given you, spot on. I wouldn't change anything.
Perhaps to look more at a academic perspective again, and going back to your involvement within sports science. As an individual that has notable experiences in the field of performance sports, your perspective on sports statistics is valuable. Significantly, it is evident that analytics and data-driven decision-making have become integral to sports management. Could you discuss the role of analytics and data-driven decision-making in sports management, and how do you utilize data to improve team performance and make strategic decisions?
Yes, Michael. I think it's something that's been growing. Data science around the world. You look at all the fancy franchise sport that's coming up, the auctions and stuff. Those things are purely done on data. And if you look at teams that wants to play at coastal level, you look at the last 3 years data, what happened at the coast. And this is the key part of forward thinking. You got to bring that thing that's sharp on your axe. And I believe data science is gonna explode in the next couple of years in sport, because it really has started already to show the importance of analytics and data in certain sporting codes. You look at athletics, for example, where I'm also involved in. My head coach is driven by data. We're doing certain tests now, and I ask him why. He says, no, but the data always tells me this. So coaches are starting to utilize more and more of data, which is a good thing, because this will help us to grow, firstly, but it also puts people out of their comfort zone, because maybe you need to, in cricket, you need to play the spin bowler at a certain time better, or straight down the wicket, or you must run an angle in athletics around the bend a bit better, because maybe that is the 1%. We speak about you can do 99% of things right, and then there's always that 1% that's missing. And I am a firm believer, Michael, that is becoming that 1% that we need to start not chasing, but utilizing to our benefit.
It's crazy. You're referring to the 1% now, and how that plays an integral role in development. And, it's always about the day-to-day coming in, trying to be consistent, to try and find that edge. And looking specifically in the field of sports science, I think it takes it back to perhaps in the late 1990s, to where S&Cs were being introduced, and people were starting to go, wow, this has a really good enhancements of gameplay. It's showing great improvements to how athletes perform, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. Perhaps now looking more into the early 2000s, or around the 2010, where now there's the introduction of sports psychology, which only as of late is starting to pop off as people and organizations are starting to realize the pertinence behind having this integrated to find and fine-tune that edge. And then again, we're looking at the sports science perspective, and how that 1%, it may be through literally the lens of a camera, and trying to understand that unforeseen perspective on how can we apply a new tactic or a new technique to better our performance as an individual, one, and then our performance as a team, two, so that when you show up on race day, when you're showing up on game day, cool, this is how we are going to maneuver or manage the space, which is different to what the opposing team or our competitors have seen in the past. But looking at numbers and data and analytics can be a little bit cold. I mean, it's just a lot of footage and hard stats, which is all done on a computer screen. And maybe to flip the coin, and we touched on it earlier, it's to look at the emotion side of it. What's going on in the nugget of the athlete, in the brain? And we're talking about the mental wellness. In your position, athlete welfare, and this includes physical and mental well-being, is of utmost importance in the sports industry. Within the sporting realm, athletes are consistently pushing themselves to become the best versions of themselves that they can be. They wish to optimize their performing ability and are therefore willing to push themselves to the limit. As a sports manager, how do you prioritize athlete welfare and ensure their physical and mental well-being is in a highly competitive and demanding industry, specifically considering that within university, student athletes are required to balance the extra load of academic obligations?
Yeah, Michael, this is something close to heart because I firmly believe we keep on forgetting that athletes are human beings. We are actually just human beings. And for me as a sport manager, this is something that I really take quite, not personal. I'll say I take it personal and I make it my point to get to all my athletes, not necessarily have a sit down coffee with people, but just checking in, on a day-to-day basis. People can say they're okay over the phone and they can hide. But when I see you and I ask you, are you okay? And you say yes, but you can look at their eyes. And that comes with also a bit of experience. I've been there myself where it's not okay to speak up, but it's about creating that environment. And again, I'm very honored and privileged to work for an institution at Stellenbosch University and multi-sport, where that is the one area that we've really grown in the last couple of years, is we've acknowledged that there's other things that impacts and has an effect on athletes. Because, Michael, we need to understand the context of socioeconomics, and if you understand that, you understand that athletes are just actually human beings, that we put people on a pedestal and putting this unnecessary pressure on them. And that's why, for me, I create the environment where you are free to come to my open door policy, just to come say, I'm doing better than what I was doing yesterday. Not to give context, or I am okay, but I'm actually really okay. To have that conversation, I tell you, Michael, it really can change or break someone. And that is something that we've established at Mortis Cricket and Athletics, more so in the cricket, because I'm quite new to athletics, where you create the environment where it's so good that you can speak to your buddy as well. The buddy system, which is really important, because sometimes it's important to hear from your peers that, it's okay. Because people do see us, as sport managers, as like a principal. Ooh, when Keagan phones me, I'm in trouble. But sometimes when my friend phoned me and asked me, am I okay? They actually care as much as Keagan asks, am I okay? And he cares. But, and this is bringing me back to the talent idea as well. When you recruit someone, you can't just recruit them because they're good enough and they're a stats player. You got to be invested in that player. And that is what I believe we have gotten right. And in my environment, I'm invested in 27 high-performance cricket players, and I'm invested in 25 high-performance multi-athletics athletes.
I think it's truly, and as you mentioned, it's pertinent in today's society to understand how mental health plays a crucial role in athlete well-being, and how for many years that was overseen and overlooked, and it was frowned upon when individuals were to speak out and talk about their emotions, where per se sport wasn't meant to be focused on how an individual felt. It was meant to just be get on the field and perform, especially perhaps in a professional environment or the setting where you're playing for a team and you're expected to show up and be consistent. And having spoken to many athletes within my immediate sphere and trying to understand the difference obviously between the sporting codes, but how the context is similar in the emotional journey that we often go through in the day-to-day, having to show up, having to give it everything you can do. And it's not a because you have to. It's because you want to, and it's because you love the game, and it's because you're passionate about what you're doing. And it stems back to what we spoke about earlier. But in having to show up and in having to give it everything you have, I mean, you can often find that you're burning yourself thin. And we spoke about it prior, and it's when you have so many obligations, and specifically in a university context, being a student athlete, knowing how to juggle the ball, so to speak, and ensure that you are still looking after Keagan Van Aarde, the human being, not Keagan Van Aarde, the sports manager or the residence head or the athletes. And the same in my shoes, it's, are you looking after the individual, and are you willing to check in on those around you? And even though I mentioned that there's a similarity between athletes, you also mentioned in the context of South Africa, we need to understand the social, political, social, economical factors and variables that are crucial in how that can influence different individuals. And in an institution such as Multi Sports, I think we are fortunate that there has been a platform that has been developed where athletes are able to speak up, where we can be educated about mental health. We can be assisted and supported to ensure that we are being catered for as athletes.
No, definitely, Michael. And rightfully, like you said, we are very privileged. If you look at let's look at the Varsity Cup, the Varsity Sport campaigns. They've actually went the extra mile to speak about the Speak Up campaign. And I think about it and I say to myself, we are in such a good space where we can tell people it's okay not to be okay. And I think that is, and the education part, Michael, is for me the important part, because we must also acknowledge that people come from different backgrounds where mental health, the stigma, men doesn't speak about emotions. We have to first acknowledge that, and then secondly, we need to educate. But I think what the biggest thing for student athletes is we as sport administrators, as coaches, as CEOs of big companies wanting to sponsor, we need to respect and we need to appreciate the sacrifices that has been made. Because I always say to all my student athletes, you don't have a normal life. You won't be able to go out Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and compete at the highest level. That's just impossible. But in saying that, I tell them, athletes, I appreciate, but I also acknowledge the sacrifices that you guys make. And I think that is very important.
On a personal level, having the opportunity to work alongside you within the leadership space in Res, it is truly admirable to see how you are invested within, number one, the student athletes in Res and those beyond within your different codes, and how, and this takes also like now perhaps a broader perspective, how in that role you're having to cater for so many unique individuals, so many unique needs, and it's a very diverse role in which you play as you're catering for, again, so many individuals in so many different spaces. And we've spoken about this before, and I have asked you this question, but I would love to perhaps tap into it now. In the realm of sports, a deep sense of purpose and personal motivation can be a driving force behind an individual's success. It too can play a role in the philosophy you wish to live by and how this has a direct effect on those that are around you. The environment you wish to create can uplift and enrich a team's trajectory to success. And that leads me to, what is your why? And how does that relate back to your role as both a human being and a sports manager?
My why, as simple as it is, create the opportunity for those that didn't have the opportunity. Create an environment where people can excel, can be authentic to themselves, and to actually give back to something as simple as sport that has given me so much. That is my why. And I don't know if I've achieved it yet. I don't believe so, because I still have a lot to give in my role as a sport manager.
Something that's truly inspiring, and we spoke about it in our leadership sessions at the start of this year, and it's the phrase people for people. You are invested in those that are around you. You're invested in the community that you form a part of. You're invested in the institution that you play an important role, as you has an immediate effect on the individuals that you're day to day dealing with. And I mentioned it to you, and it's something that I always strive for, but you aspire to inspire, and you're trying to live up your potential to really connect with individuals, but to make a change, to make a difference within, and that goes beyond sport. So it's within the individuals that you have the opportunity to walk a path with, and take them beyond the sporting code, whether that may be in leadership or in their own personal spheres, which is truly, and it's always inspiring to see that, and how in that space you're willing to go above and beyond in order to give back.
No, I thank you for that, Michael, and it's true. I agree with you. People for people, and for me, it stems down to also, I come from a community where everyone thinks it's kind of impossible, and for me to be a beacon of hope, and not to be arrogant about it, but to actually just be the authentic Keagan Van Aarde, so that whoever recognize me tomorrow or whenever can say, you know what, I come from the same Paul, Klein Drakensteinweg, and I something good. I can be the change. And I think that for me is the most important thing. And that's something that I'll always want to leave behind with my leaders as well. And in particular in a race, this is not a popularity contest. It's a lonely journey. But those that you really inspire will be the ones that will carry you through the journey, because that's why we wake up in the morning.
That is really cool. And I think this is a perfect segue in which we can end off the episode. And maybe on a final note, is there any advice that you can give to our listeners who may be interested in pursuing a career within the field of sports management or sports science, or with any other pertinent facet that is integral to the sporting industry?
Michael, like I always tell you, it's important that people must find their why. My biggest advice to the listeners and the followers would be, go and live your dream. Don't limit yourself. Go and find your why, even if it's at the age of 30, even if it's at the age of whatsoever. Don't limit yourself, because once we limit ourselves, you will always live with what ifs. And that is something that I always say, you don't know until you know. And my biggest motivator, and the one quote that I live by, is by the late Mama Charlotte Makeke, that says, live amongst those. Because if you can bring one person with you, you have achieved something. So in the world of sport, go out and be comfortable with the uncomfortable, but also know who the true you are. So that would be my piece of advice.
Thank you so much, Keagan Van Aarde, for joining me today on Ballers Brew. It has been an absolute delight to have this conversation with you and to get a better understanding as to what your role pertains to as being the sports manager for both athletics and cricket, and how that interlinks into your role within Huis Neertling. For those that are listening, I think it's a good takeaway when you're looking at the world of sports and you're trying to understand sports management as a whole. You are dealing with so many unique individuals. You're dealing with unique players, talent identification, and subsidiary organizations and committees, and also those that are above you. And it's important in those roles to create a culture, to find a why and base it on values in which you believe you can create an environment that's going to be the best fitted for all those individuals, and to continuously keep striving towards success. And as I always like to say, onwards and upwards. You have to dream big. You need to stay ambitious. And if you're working with the fuel and a drive that's inside you, you have to shoot for the stars and you'll land on the moon. For those that are listening, I appreciate your time and thank you so much for always tuning in. As I always promise, there are many more episodes to follow with engaging and insightful content. But for now, I am your host, Michael Bromfield. This is Ballers Brew signing out.